In the two-story house that my brother and I shared, my brother lived downstairs, and I lived upstairs. One night, when I was alone watching a horror movie, I was disturbed by the open layout. It was a large space where the living room, dining room, and kitchen were together. My couch was in the center of the room, and a large area behind me was dark. Although I am a 30-year-old man, I cannot deny that being home alone is uncomfortable at times, especially when watching a horror movie. After the movie was over, I turned off all the lights and went to bed. After about 2 hours of sleep, I woke up around 1 a.m. and heard a voice from downstairs. It sounded like my sister's voice, but I thought it was strange because it didn't usually come very often. Sleepily, I went downstairs and answered her, but when I reached the brightly lit kitchen with the lights on, I found no one there. My sister was usually not home because she lived 20 miles away with her girlfriend. When I heard her talking, I couldn't react to her, but I thought she was just waiting for me to answer her. I looked around in the dark for a while, then went back to bed and tried to call my sister, but there was no answer. I tried to think of what I had experienced that night as a hallucination, but as I thought about my sister's voice and how clearly I could hear the noise, a sense of anxiety came over me. I wanted to see it as a hallucination because the alternative thought would have been much more terrifying. Growing up, I was often alone because my mother worked as a nurse. One night I had my friend Molly over while my mother worked the night shift. After watching a movie for a while, Molly had to go home because her parents didn't allow late nights. When I was alone, watching TV in my upstairs room, I heard a sound of one of the chairs being dragged across the deck outside. I looked out the window and saw someone sitting downstairs. I called her name, thinking it was Molly, but it was a stranger. The man looked up and our eyes met. I backed away in fear, turned off the lights and tried not to move in a way that would give away my presence. When I dared to look out again, he was still down there and looking up. It was obviously a man, and he had definitely seen me. I got up the courage to ask him what he wanted. At that moment, his shoulders started to go up and down, as if he was laughing very hard, but I didn't hear any laughter. I told him to please go away, and then I walked away from the window again. I waited in my bedroom in fear. I don't know why, but that night I was afraid to call the police. I didn't leave the room and waited the night in silence. I didn't want to make any vocal movement, because I was afraid that the window was open and any movement could be heard. He could also unlock the door, and if he wanted to kill me or kidnap me, he could easily do it. I didn't go to bed that night, and when my mother came home around 9 o'clock in the morning, I told her what had happened. When I told her how stupid I was to call 911 that night, I still question her about how stupid I was. We were a family of 5. I was 10. My older brother was 14 and my younger sister was 5. One Friday night, while my brother was out with his friends, my parents received a phone call. I heard my mom start crying and I was scared, so I rushed over to see what was wrong. My mother had received a call from the hospital, saying that my brother had been hit by a car. We were immediately frightened, and my brother's leg was broken. I don't know the other details of the phone call. While I was trying to figure out what was going on, my parents put on their jackets and rushed out, and asked if they could leave me home alone. I said I could stay at home, and then my mum said they didn't want to take my sister with them while my brother was recovering. My mother refused to go away from my father. I was relieved to see my father trying to calm my mother down so that they could go home when my brother got better. Suddenly alone, I played for a while longer, then noticed strange figures appearing upstairs. I couldn't identify them and hid, bracing myself for possible threats. Although I later learned that they were burglars, I felt the pain of being aware of something due to my naivety. Although it was lucky that I was unharmed, I realized how fragile it is to be alone as a child. I am 23 years old and still live with my parents. One day, while playing basketball in the front yard, when they were both not home, I saw a woman in an upstairs window. It was not my mother or sister, just a random woman. When I went inside to investigate, I couldn't find her anywhere. I became suspicious and told my neighbors about the incident. When nothing was found, she went back home to feel healthy. That evening, my mind was still racing, even though I mostly tried to rest. The situation outside made me more skeptical, and after this incident, I was more careful about opening the door to strangers. That night, when I heard strange noises, I had to check my room. The room was not completely quiet because of the fan above me, and so when I heard the first sound, I didn't think I should look the other way. But the sounds started to sound human. When I turned to the other side, I saw a woman coming out of there. She came out from under the bed. I was very scared when she stood on the bed towards me. I attacked her as she jumped on top of me. I put my hand on her throat and asked her who she was. There was a knock on our door. My neighbor came again and helped me. I called the police with the woman, and we found out her name was Karen. Knowing that the police had dealt with her before made me feel the weight of what I had been through. I expressed my gratitude to my neighbor, but the incident increased my insecurity about opening the door to strangers. Being home alone usually relaxed me, but one night when my parents went out, the feeling of being home alone intoxicated me. As I sat on the couch watching a horror movie, I couldn't help but glance into the dark corner behind me. There was a strange anxiety of not being able to see anything in the huge living room, except the light from the TV. When the movie was over, I heard a sound that made the silence more pronounced. A small crunch, like footsteps. I turned quickly, but the rooms were all empty. Still, there was an uneasiness in me. I checked the doors and they were all closed, but one door was ajar. I closed the door, but soon after I felt something breathing inside. The lights went out as I rushed out of the room. I wandered between rooms in the darkness. I wanted to reach the door, but it wouldn't open. It was like it was locked. I was trapped in the room. Just then, a shadowy figure appeared. His voice said that I recognized the person in front of me, but I couldn't remember him. At that moment, everything in the room trembled, and hundreds of eyes looked at me through the walls. "You can find the real me," the figure said and pulled me in. Suddenly the lights came back on. The door opened. I was no longer alone in the room. The shadow confronted me with the secrets of my past. Pictures were talking, things were dancing. "I have come to show you the truth," the shadow said. I got lost in the secrets. I retreated into the depths of my own inner world. Finally, the door opened and light flooded in. The shadow disappeared, but I had to face the truths it had left me. The silence in the house now symbolized my own inner turmoil. Facing the secrets behind the doors gave a completely different meaning to being alone in the house.